Hello everyone, Jazzy's back with the continuation of this long discussion of the Kingdom Hearts Union Cross finale. I thought I was going to do it in 2 parts, but I had to break it up into 3 as there was a lot more to explain and connect than I initially thought. It's funny to think that I was trying to do this all in one video, but that of course did not happen because it's just everything's just piling on each other at this point. So before continuing with more Kingdom Hearts Union Cross theories, let's revisit a theory I proposed in part 2 that will lead directly into other theories that are going to be presented in part 3. In my last video, I theorized that Luxu created a temporal paradox in which he will save himself from an ill fate, aka saving himself from death, and that this will essentially lead to all the future events, especially anything connected with the passing of the Master of Masters Keyblade. So my idea is that the scene that we see in this finale update, in which Luxu reveals his face, has the black box and Keyblade on hand, is that this scene that we're witnessing is before all the events of Kingdom Hearts Union Cross. So that time in between the end of the Keyblade War and then but before or even during that time that we have the main characters in the Daybreak Town. So that would explain why Luxu still has the Keyblade and why he still has the black box. Now in terms of explaining why he has the same face as Brain, I would reason that they are the same person. And my main theory that I presented last video is that he created this temporal paradox in which he rescued himself from perishing in the destruction of Daybreak Town. And so that's why Brain was sent to Scala ad Caelum, and Luxu, at that point, after having saved himself in the form of Braig, he decided to cast his heart aside and pretty much, hop to different bodies while he's, off to the side, following the Keyblade as it gets passed down from master to apprentice, master to apprentice. Of course, there's probably a chunk of time that we're missing and certain scenes that we're still probably missing in terms of seeing Luxu actually give Brain the Keyblade. I couldn't think of anyone else it would go to at this point, because everyone else was either still in the data world or already in the future. So for me, this theory would make the most sense. It, checks off the box of why, Luxu and Brain share a face because they're the same person. It explains the scene itself by saying it's set in the past and not something that's in the future, which is what I initially thought, that they hop to the future, but it would seem like this scene occurs before all the events unfold in Daybreak Town. I had as my thumbnail for my last video kind of like a chain reaction that occurred. So since Luxu saved himself in the form of Braig, this allowed Brain. Since Luxu saved himself in the form of Brain was able to go to Scala ad Caelum, and then he was able to become the grandfather of Eraqus. While he was in Scala ad Caelum, he probably became a master. And of course, he probably bequeathed the gazing eye to his apprentice, and then that apprentice would gift it to Xehanort. Unfortunately not Eraqus, but Eraqus would get Ephemer's Keyblade that was originally with Brain. So then you had that whole situation. Now, what also happened, since Luxu was able to save Brain was able to send those 2 pods back into the data world to rescue Ephemer and Skuld. So if you remember in the scene, we see that the pods are still there when Luxu and Brain are communicating. So it's something that happened after they had that interaction. So again, that would be a chain reaction. So as they were rescued out the data world, now we see that Ephemer became the first Keyblade Master and established Scala ad Caelum. And now going into this theory territory, now it would seem that maybe Ephemer and maybe even possibly Skuld are ancestors to Xehanort. We do see Xehanort's mother. She kind of does look like, and Xehanort himself, they look like a blend of those two specifically. So I would think that since Brain was able to save them, this allowed for Xehanort to be born, and this allowed for him to come in possession of the Gazing Eye Keyblade and cause the Keyblade War. The other part of this image is again with Luxu, since he will eventually end up in the form of Braig. We know that Braig came in contact with Subject X, and the Subject X is Skuld. Then I would think that maybe he actually maybe sent her back in time to Scala Adkylum, and again, that's how they were able to cross paths and have Xehanort. It may or may not have happened. That's still something I'm, a little iffy on, but I'm pretty sure Skuld went to Radiant Garden. And if she went to Radiant Garden first, then maybe Braig has sent her back to Scala Adkylum in the past. Now, the last part of this image is that we have what I think is Ava's role in all this is that she actually helped Luxu. She helped Luxu save himself or change the events of the futures and how they're going to play out, because now it seems like they both have their hands in trying to change the future. Because Luxu told Ava what his role was. Ava was dead set on not following the Book of Prophecies word from word and kind of going against all this future destructions that was going to happen. So I would assume that Ava actually helped again with this situation to keep Brain around, making him a union leader even though he wasn't supposed to be, because the Master of Masters chose Ven, not Brain. And so with that switcheroo, as he called it, again, that led to all the following events. And then Ava, I would think, is a true dandelion, and I want to say Luxu, or I want to say she was the one that Luxu put into one of the pods to go into the future. And of course, there's that big theory out there that Ava is Kyrie's grandmother, probably. I think Ava and Strelitzia are sharing hearts, or at least Strelitzia and Kyrie, and then they're just connected to Ava, but I feel those three again are connected. So I think that's the situation that's going on here. That's what makes sense in my head, that again, Luxu saving himself from perishing in Daybreak Town essentially led to all the other events that will come. And again, that's something that, and this is something that's been highlighted in the Kingdom Hearts series, especially in Kingdom Hearts Key, whatever, back cover, that the simple act of the Master of Masters giving Luxu this task of watching the events unfold without the Book of Prophecies is what set everything in motion, because he is observing just from the he's observing from the outside looking in, and he wants to understand, like, is this a Master of Masters intentions or not, and do I need to step in and make my own decisions? And of course, Master of Masters always telling Luxu, follow your heart be your guiding key, and he purposely keeps telling him that because he knows Luxu, and probably Ava too, in this situation, they're going to be following their hearts and changing this whole timeline. And I think that's what the Master is banking on. So again, we have this outcome that light will prevail and darkness will be defeated. But then the conclusion that we're seeing right now is the return of the Lost Masters. We don't know where Ava is. We haven't seen the Master of Masters, but we know that he had went to the fictional world. He's in Quadratum, so that's where he disappeared to. So now you're at this next arc in terms of dealing with these 7 deadly darknesses that are within the Master of Masters and his apprentices, and then 6 other darknesses that are also lingering around, whether they be in other union leaders or they're free. And we know where one of them is. Again, one of them is inside Ven and manifests as Vanitas. And so that's the situation that we're at right now. We still have these 7 strong darknesses around, and then now we have discussion of 7 crowns, or I guess 7 new lights that are going to carry over into this fictional world. So without further ado, we are going to finally transition to the last parts, the last cutscenes coming from this Kingdom Hearts Union Cross update, and more so focusing on kind of actually going back to the cutscene in which we see the reveal of Xehanort's past. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Like, comment, share, and subscribe as always, and let's keep on going. In the Kingdom Hearts Union Cross finale, we learn that Xehanort is originally from Skuld Kylum, not Destiny Islands. We see that his mother, as a baby, his mother gives him to this old man, and this old man brings him to Destiny Islands where he grows up. And unfortunately, it does seem that the old man passes away, and some point after that, Xehanort finds himself, communicating with that brown-robed figure, and he ends up in Skuld Kylum where he meets Eraqus. Looking at the mother, she looks like Skuld, although she has different eye colors. She doesn't have those really bright orange eyes, but these orange eyes are very characteristic or a trademark of Xehanort, and that's something that Skuld possesses. So that makes me believe maybe Skuld is Xehanort's grandmother, and that his mother is a child of Skuld and somebody else. And this theory would work if you remember from my last video, I had introduced that maybe Skuld had went to Radiant Garden first. Brain Sisters, who found her, knew who she was and sent her back to Skuld Kylum, and then that would create that paradox in which Skuld had to be returned to Skuld Kylum for Xehanort to come into existence. And then branching off of that, Brain would be Eraqus's grandfather, which is a lot, the idea that all of us really have. And then I'm presenting the idea that maybe Ephemer is a grandfather, some type of ancestor to Baldair. And this, I thought, if you're going back to part 1 of my videos in terms of who's sharing hearts or lineages, whatever you want to call it, that the flow I created from Ephemer goes through Baldair and then goes to Sora. And then, of course, that probably originated with the Master of Masters. So I think they're all in a line versus, Eraqus and Brain being in line with Luxu. Again, technically, Xehanort is not in a line with Skuld. This is more parental, lineage type of thing. Because Xehanort seems to be connected to the player and then also connected to Riku, as I had pointed out before. Another situation is that, of course, Xehanort has this silver hair, and that's characteristic of Ephemer. And so, could he be Ephemer's grandson, and maybe even Ephemer and Skuld were united? Because again, they did leave the ruined Daybreak Town at the same time. So maybe Skuld didn't go to Radiant Garden first. Maybe Skuld came here, or if she did go to Radiant Garden first and was thrown back here, maybe it was to the time that that Ephemer was establishing the city or whatnot. And then maybe Ephemer and Skuld are Xehanort's grandparents, and that would again explain why Xehanort will develop these characteristic orange eyes, and then it also explain why he has silver hair like Ephemer. Of course, another thought that crossed my mind is that looking at the woman, she kind of honestly looks the most like Brain in terms of like hair color and eye color. So could Brain actually be the grandfather to Xehanort? And if not just Xehanort, maybe he's a grandfather to Xehanort and Eraqus. They just don't know it because they grew up in two completely different places. And if Skuld is involved or not, then maybe Brain, and maybe when Skuld was sent from Radiant Garden to Skuld Kylum, she went to the time to where Brain was, and then those two had a child, and then which would explain why she looks like Skuld but has Brain's eyes, and then that became Xehanort, and maybe this child also is the mother of Eraqus, or has a sibling, that's the father or mother of Eraqus. That could be that type of situation, and then that could lead Ephemer back to being the grandfather or descendant going into Baldair. I kind of like that situation. That would be interesting to learn, they're actually like cousins or something, actually a close relationship versus just like best friends. However, like I always do, I need to venture back into in-game context, be it secret reports or conversations characters are having. And so looking back at Secret Report 2 from Xehanort, and also conversation between Eraqus and Baldair, we learn that Eraqus descended from the very first masters in the Age of Fairy Tales, and we do know that Ephemer is the first master of Scholar at Kylum, and he has Eraqus' Keyblade, or the Keyblade that will become Eraqus's. He battled the darkness, and that's how he was able to establish Scholar at Kylum. So then this, of course, has me thinking that maybe Eraqus is Ephemer's grandson, and Xehanort is more connected to Brain. He's Brain's grandson. And of course, that Ephemer would pass on that Keyblade specifically to his grandson. And I kind of still just have Skuld floating between the two. If she's there, if she's not, I don't know. But that'll be interesting if they kind of switched them, and then, because it's like Eraqus has the black hair with an Ephemer has the silver hair, and Xehanort has the silver hair, and Brain has black hair, so they're maybe trying to trick us by switching the hair colors around or whatever. But of course, digging deeper into Secret Report 2, and then also some kind of like parallels that you see within the game, this next theory I have is kind of the one that I prefer. And again, it kind of ties back to this whole temporal paradox. And it's specifically kind of looking at some type of weird situation of a grandfather. It's literally called grandfather temporal paradox. And so with this, if you're looking at Secret Report 2, Xehanort specifically says Eraqus is a blueblood descended from the very first masters in the Age of Fairy Tales. Right? So dissecting this, the only masters that were in the Age of Fairy Tales, assuming that it ended with the end of Daybreak Town, were the Lost Masters. The Union leaders, again, were never given the title of masters during this time. And again, that's something Luxu points out in his secret reports, is that he literally calls Union leaders that they are no masters. So the masters that I would think that Xehanort is referring to is going to be the Master of Masters and his apprentices. And we do see with Xehanort a lot, he refers to the Lost Masters more so than he refers to the Union leaders. So that's also something to keep in mind. So I think that's what they were trying to get us to go towards, is that think about the Lost Masters, not so much the Union leaders right now type of thing, right? And so one little cute little thing I had caught that kind of made me lean towards this being the case, is that in the conversation with the Masters talking about the fictional world, he referenced quadratum with this what's called a reference mark in Japanese text, in which it's just citing something specifically in text, but the shape of it, the design of this mark, we are seeing 4 quadrants, which is represented by a square. And of course, you're seeing this X in the middle. So for me, even though, it's blatantly calling out quadratum, that's what quadratum is. You have these 4 districts in Tokyo that, represents this main world that quadratum is modeled off of, obviously off of Tokyo specifically. But knowing their names, Eraqus, rearrange the letters, you get square, and Luxu having X in his name, maybe that's also a reference saying that Luxu and Eraqus are connected, and for me, I would think that they're related. And again, going back to my theory from my last video, that Luxu and Brain are the same person. So then that would explain that Luxu-Brain is a grandfather to Eraqus. Because Luxu went back and saved himself so he could become the grandfather to Eraqus and possibly Xehanort too. So maybe that was the thing that he was trying to ensure, that these 2 people come into existence. Because again, Eraqus is going to be responsible for passing on the light to future generations, and Xehanort is going to be that scapegoat that starts the Keyblade War that will ultimately bring back the Lost Masters. Some other things I wanted to point out from this dialogue in Secret Report 2 is that Xehanort specifically says that he wants to be Eraqus' equal. And to do that, he must learn to wield power born from both darkness and light in proper balance. And of course, knowing from this update that this is something highly associated with the Lost Masters in terms of holding a darkness and light in proper balance. Again, this would connect back to Luxu. This would connect back to Brain being a union leader, in which these individuals will contain that power. And this is something that was probably passed on to Eraqus. This is something that Xehanort knows is associated with Eraqus's familial line specifically. So that's why, again, I think this is where they're going with in terms of saying, and and the wording and everything kind of making sense, is that, again, Luxu and Brain are the same person, and that this individual will become the grandfather of Eraqus. It's also interesting that, again, you're kind of also making a connection between these two people, that Brain and Eraqus both receive scars on their faces from Terra. Maybe that's another connection to saying that, yes, they are related. And then also Eraqus, we see that, again, in his conversation with Balder, that he has this real aversion to darkness, and it's probably because the strong one that was in Luxu, and if Brain ended up, being a union, ended up with, and if Brain, being a union leader, ended up one of the darknesses as well, that, there's too much darkness for Eraqus, and he's kind of adverse to them being around, since they resided in since these darknesses resided in his grandfather. So that's kind of the thoughts I had there in terms of parallels and kind of connecting everything, connecting both the theories, seeing what's going on, but definitely some type of paradox situation going on. And who knows, I could be completely wrong. You never know. They might throw a loop in there. I could be partially right, partially wrong, but they might throw a loop in there, and that Erd, being her name being connected to like these Norse, I guess, goddesses associated with time. Maybe she actually is the grandchild of Ephemer and Skuld. She does have the orange eyes like Skuld. She does have the silver hair like Ephemer. So maybe she's more connected to them. And then you're having this whole situation with Brain on the other side in terms of bringing Xehanort and Eraqus into existence. So that's another idea too. You just never know. You can go based off of appearances and what's going on, but you just never know. Last but not least, even thinking back to, I think it was actually my earliest Kingdom Hearts theory video that I discussed the 13 stars in the final world. I was trying to connect quotes to Kingdom Hearts characters, of course, that we knew of at the time. And so initially, this quote here, I had connected to Ephemer, because, it's always talking about burdens and that kind of thing, and that's something that Ephemer always referenced during his, during his time in Kingdom Hearts Union Cross, that this quote seemed to fit him the best. However, looking at the context more closely, in terms of, thinking about someone being a burden and somebody crying, but it warming the person's heart, I would say maybe it is like a mother talking about her child in this situation, and maybe this quote actually belongs to Xehanort's mother, in which, in which she refers to Xehanort as a burden. Maybe she knew the fate that would await Xehanort in the future. Maybe, maybe it wasn't a secret, and maybe that's why specifically, or maybe she was trying to send him to Destiny Island to prevent it, but that still didn't work. But whatever the case is, it would seem like this quote now kind of maybe fits her a little bit better. So I'm curious to see if other quotes, as we meet other characters in Dark Road and Scala Kylum, if these quotes will align better with them, because there were a couple that I was like, yeah, this is really, really weird situations. I'm not sure who this would align with. So, maybe at one point I'll revisit those quotes to see what's going on as Dark Road reveals more cutscenes and more characters and whatnot. For me, I'm just going to shamelessly put in my little plug here for this fanfiction I've been working on forever. I kid you not, I started this back in 2006, and then I got to some point, I think in 2013, where I was sort of kind of crossing Final Fantasy 7 and Kingdom Hearts, but still more emphasis on Final Fantasy 7. And since 2013 till now, I've been going back and editing it, trying to add information to make a more robust cross between Final Fantasy 7 and Kingdom Hearts. And of course, since Kingdom Hearts is ongoing for like ever and ever. And now we have Final Fantasy VII Remake. It's taking many, many years to finish up this fanfic. So for me, the main thing is that, you know, I keep getting stuck at certain parts because I want to introduce characters into the mix, but I'm still not entirely sure of some of their names, Luxord and Demix. Still don't know their true names. We'll figure that out at some point. Because I was totally off with Marluxia and Larxene. I was gonna call Larxene Arlene. I rearranged her letters as Arlene. And then I think I had, Lord, I think Marluxia was like Ali Rama or something weird. I was totally off when guessing their names. But again, of course, I waited until their names got revealed to upload at least part 1 and 2 since they were introduced in part 1. So now I'm stuck on part 3 right now because I'm trying to figure out. I'm like, okay, who's Xehanort's parents? Is it Skuld? Is it Ephemer? Is it neither one? So we'll see how long I have to wait for them for that to be revealed in Kingdom Hearts. But yeah, so part 3 is coming soon-ish. I just uploaded part 2 the other day, so you can go ahead and check that out. Of course, part 1 has been uploaded for some time now too. Let me know what you think about those fanfics as well. I would love to do like voiceovers. Like I just need to find some friends to do different voices for all these characters, because that would be an interesting project. But for now, I kind of just have you immersed in the environment of what's going on in the events or in the scenes of the different events in the fanfic. And so with that, y'all, we have made it. We got through this whole discussion about the Kingdom Hearts Reunion Cross finale, how to break it down into 3 separate parts. Initially, I thought it was going to be 1, and then it became 2, and then it definitely became 3. You got the 7 Nights, 13 Darknesses. The Master of Masters, or Luxu, is working towards the 13 Darknesses gaining a form to be defeated. You have the sharing of hearts through the different generations of the 7 of Lights. We had temporal paradoxes occurring, with Luxu trying to save himself, to preserve the light for the future generations, to lead to light prevailing and darkness failing, or darkness being defeated and light prevailing. And then finally, our segue into Dark Road in terms of learning more about Xehanort's past and who his mother could be, and of course above his mother, who his grandparents could be, and things I hope to see in Dark Road in terms of Xehanort's interaction with the darkness. We know that there's 4 that are in the data world, and I really hope that he gets into a situation in which he encounters those 4 darknesses, and that will further explain the fates of those 4 darknesses, if they end up in the Union Leaders or not. And of course, in the end, segueing to the next Kingdom Hearts game, in which we have the Lost Masters returning from their slumber, and now Luxu reunited with the Gazing Eye, Keyblade, and the Black Box. And of course, finally getting confirmation about what is in this Black Box, which of course I believe is the data of the 13 original darknesses and the data of either the 7 original lights or the 7 Union Leaders, whatever you want to call them. Be these 7 be the Master of Masters, and 2 of them be Demix and Luxor. Maybe one of them is Luxu. Maybe it's none of those 3. But I really want to figure out what Demix and Luxor's roles in all this, because Luxor, of course, knows. I feel like he knows a lot of what's going on, and also Demix is not letting others know that how much he knows. So he's being very, very secretive as well. But with that said, again, I will leave a series of theory videos off here. If you love this content, like, subscribe, and share these videos. Have all these discussions on whatever forums, whatever platforms you guys use. I know some people have saying they've, discussed my videos on certain group chats or whatever, whatever's out there, or forums and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'll catch you in the next video. Share any of your theories. Comment on my theories, or comment on maybe things that I've missed. Because again, it's just a lot of content to take in, but it's always fun trying to piece everything together. And even if my theories are way out there or they're right on target, hey, it's just fun putting them together. Catch you next time. Take care.